Season 1 of Medsplaining is brought to you by Estee Lauder. With 40 years of night repair expertise and 30 years of collagen research, Estee Lauder are the expert in nighttime skincare. I'm Dr. Jennifer Zelovitzky. Welcome to Medsplaining. Welcome to my very first episode. I'm so excited to launch this podcast. But first, did you know that poor sleep can double the signs of aging in your skin? Estee Lauder's Advanced Night Repair Serum with its exclusive night peptide visibly minimizes the effects of lack of sleep. One application and your skin looks plumped, hydrated, and radiant. Give your skin the beauty sleep it deserves. So I think it's important to start by telling you a little bit about me. I'm a medical doctor and a menopause expert. I actually grew up in a showbiz family. Through my teens and early 20s, I was doing acting and modeling. But when it came time for university, I realized it was really important to have a little bit of a business foundation. So I actually studied economics. After that, I went into the business world and somehow found my way to Bay Street, where I worked with a number of banks and other IT corporations. And that was really nice for a while. It gave me a really good business background. But then when I was in my 20s, my sister was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer. And I found myself staying up late at night, reading all of the medical journals, reaching out to experts all around the world who might have some knowledge to impart about how to treat and manage her condition. And along the way, I really fell in love with medicine. And I fell in love with the idea of patients being able to advocate for themselves and to have a voice in their care path. So I applied to medical school. Now, at the time, I had two small children. They were 5 and 3. I had a very, very loving and encouraging family and a very supportive husband who stayed home with the kids so I could go and pursue my dream. And so I graduated from medical school when I was in my 30s and finished family medicine residency at the age of 40. And it felt like the realization of an incredible and far-fetched dream for me. And then I've never stopped pivoting. I realized that what I really wanted to do was help women. We are such an underserved community, and we are in menopause for a third of our lives. So think about it, half the population for a third of our lives, and I was taught nothing about it in medical school or residency. And when I came to that realization, I went and I pursued certification as a menopause expert. So I take all of my knowledge as a family doctor, as a women's health advocate, as an actress, and as a menopause expert, and I have melded it all together to give you the very, very best in women's health. And I hope that you'll get something from each and every episode. Whether it touched your life directly or indirectly, there's always going to be something for you, I hope, in each and every episode. Welcome to Medsplaining. I'm so excited for my first guest, Lauren Levy. But first, a quick ad break. I think most of us want great skin, and your nighttime skincare routine is a great time to tackle that. I know that my skin looks better in the morning when I've taken the time to use products at night. So transform your nighttime routine with Estee Lauder's new Advanced Night Repair Overnight Treatment. 95% of users said their skin feels recharged upon waking, and 90% said their skin felt softer and smoother overnight. Wake up to visibly improved lines and wrinkles. So we're back. Welcome. I'm here with my guest, Lauren Levy, and I'm so excited. Thank you so much for being here today. This means a lot to me.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
And of course, we go way, way back.
Way back,
at least till last summer when I met you. As I met you as a patient, but then it's been really kind of interesting evolution since then. I appeared on your podcast in the fall, and now I've told you have to return the favor. So thank you for taking me up on that. But why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself for anyone that has been living under a rock and doesn't know who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I had a retail business for the last 10 years. It was called Annie and Ren, and we sold brands. We manufactured our own brand. We had a great e-commerce business, a great community. We ended up closing our business about a year ago. From that, also, we created a podcast called The Goods, which was amazing. And that was the podcast you were on.
Yes.
That ended recently as well. And my newest venture is building a snack brand, which is totally different. I've always loved food and cooking. And so I'm sort of, pivoting a little bit and building something new. But it's always like exciting. I feel like when you're an entrepreneur, it's just like, you're kind of like what's next and what excites you and, looking for sort of like the newest challenge. So aside from professionally speaking, I have 4 children.
And so with all your free time.
With all my free time.
Starting a business.
Yeah.
And of course, you have a very popular Instagram or social media account already, Ren's Recipes.
Yes.
Which is drool worthy.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you.
not just the...
Do you cook?
I bake.
Okay.
I bake. I wish I cooked. But something had to give. So,
it's hard to get it all in.
Something has to give. So I bake, but I mean, you're an incredible cook. So thank you so much for being here today. But we're here to talk about, something that you've experienced firsthand, which is discovering that you are a carrier of the BRCA gene.
Yep.
And all of the aftermath of that.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you take us back to the beginning?
Yeah.
Take me back to how did you discover that you were a carrier of this gene?
Yeah.
And what was going on in your life at that time?
Yeah. So I discovered that I was BRCA positive in my mid-20s. So like 5 years ago, obviously.
Right. Me too.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm 41 now. So I think I was around 24, 25. I had actually just gotten engaged. And my now husband, then fiance at the time, was like, you know what? Something had just come out. I think it was in like the Toronto Star. It was one of the newspapers. And it was about a research study that Women's College was doing. And they basically said anybody who has a history of breast cancer and who is of Ashkenazi Jewish descent can do this test for free. And my husband's like, okay, well, you fall into this category. My dad's mom had passed away from breast cancer, but that was it. It wasn't like our family had been riddled with breast cancer, but I did qualify having had breast cancer.
Okay.
And I was of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. So also at the time, and you would know better than I would now, but I think the only place where you could actually get the test was the States, and it was like $10,000. So it was very hard to test for it. So, my husband's like, it's a mouth swab. You should go do it. And it's free. Right. So I was like, oh, okay, great.
Did you have any trepidation about knowing?
No, because I didn't think I had it. I was like, oh, well, I honestly didn't really know that much about it. But I was like, well, on the off chance I have it, I would rather know. But I was like, oh, I probably don't have it because, well, you're 24 and you're just like invincible. And I'm like, I'm good. I don't have anything.
Right.
So I went and I did the test, and I can't remember how long after they called me back.
Right.
But they called me back and they were like, so you're positive for this gene. And I was honestly flabbergasted. Like I really did not think I was going to be positive.
Right.
And not only did I not think I was going to be positive, but I didn't really know what it meant. Like I knew that. So for those of your listeners who have no idea what the BRCA gene is, maybe we should explain it.
Yeah.
It basically puts you at, I think the risk is about 80% higher than the rest of the population for breast and ovarian cancer.
Yes.
Most people know about it from Angelina Jolie. They're like, oh, is that the Angelina Jolie thing? I'm like, yeah, it is. Yeah. We're basically the same person. Anyways, I knew it put me at a much higher risk, but there wasn't that much information on it.
Right. And did they explain to you what it would entail or what the decisions you'd have to make?
You know what? I actually don't entirely remember, but I think they were like, these are your options. Prophylactic double mastectomy, regular checkups if you don't want to do that. And then for ovaries, they're like, well, you'll have your kids. And then once you're done having your kids, you'll get your ovaries removed.
And you were newly engaged.
Yeah.
How far, at that time, you were in your mid-20s, you're newly engaged. I don't think you were probably thinking, let's have a family immediately.
No, definitely not. I was already like a baby. And
So-
I was like trying to build my career, and kids were
Yeah.
definitely not top of mind. But the ovaries I kind of put aside because the ovaries were like, I can't deal with this right now.
Yeah.
And again, for those people who don't know, for your breasts, that's something that you can track.
Mm-hmm.
You can, get screened regularly. You can get checked up regularly. And the biggest benefit of actually finding out, I got put into this research program where I got checked every 3 months by like the top specialists. I was going for mammograms, for MRIs. I mean, I was like, well, if they catch something, I'm good. So in my mind, I was like, why would I even get a mastectomy? I'm like, I'm literally getting the best possible screening. So I actually almost felt like safer in a weird way because I was like, I never would have done this. I didn't even know how to do a breast exam. I'd never done one. That wasn't even like a thing I had ever thought about. Maybe like once in the shower, but I was like, I don't even know what I'm feeling for. Is that like a lump or a nipple? I was like, I don't know. My breast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm like, where is everything?
And I've done explanations about what, how to check yourself. So
Right.
people can look and see the reels that I've done about that. But
Yes.
you're right, because go check your breasts is so vague.
It's so vague and you
What
have
on
no
earth are you
idea.
doing?
Yeah.
When you're young, they're lumpy, they're bumpy.
Exactly.
They're all over the place.
Exactly. So I'm like, great. I'm like, I have someone checking my breasts regularly, screening me regularly. I truly felt like I was 25 and I had better screening than most women in their 40s and 50s. Now, when it became an issue, my doctor, I loved her. She was amazing. I'm trying to remember her name now. It'll come to me, but she was incredible. And I told her when I first got pregnant, and she's like, okay, so we can't do imaging when you're pregnant.
Yes.
So we will just continue with the self-checks. And then, of course, things are lumpy. And, then things started getting more complicated because that led to false positives, which led to biopsies, which led to anxiety. So after I had my first, she's like, okay, now we can do imaging. We'll book it. And surely enough, when we had it booked, I was like already pregnant with my second.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, God, Lauren, she's like, okay, after you have this baby, you got to like give me a minute and let's do your imaging. Something happened in Croatia and I got pregnant very quickly. Anyways, it was very fun. So like, it was hard to do screening, proper screening while I was pregnant for those 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And it did create this anxiety. And so after I was done having children, shortly after I had my oophorectomy, I was like, screw this. My original decision was to not get a prophylactic mastectomy because of that safety net. But after all the biopsies, the stress, I was like, I am not dealing with this. I have 4 young children. What am I, even doing? Even waiting that time in between pregnancies, cancers can develop. Like I know how quickly breast cancer can develop. And so it was just too much. And I said, you know what? I don't want to deal with this. And I had it done. And it was the best decision I made for me because it took that anxiety as a mom with 4 young kids, as a business owner. I mean, I didn't have time to worry about myself.
Right.
So, and my ovaries, I will deal with after children, which on a side note, so I have 4 kids.
Yes.
And my kids are all basically a year apart. I didn't know how long it was going to take me to have children. I had friends who were in the process of having kids. Some, it was like 2, 3, 4, who knows? So I was like to my husband, we're just going to go with God. We both want a big family and let's just see what happens. And I was very fortunate that I got pregnant quickly because I'm like, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm 40 and I have 1 child and we want more. And now I'm stressed because ovarian cancer, your risks increase as soon as you hit 40.
Absolutely.
So like that was always in the back of my mind where I was like, once we start wanting to have a family, let's just, I'm not going to go on the pill in between kids. We're not going to, and
we were getting to the point that there's no screening test for ovarian cancer.
There's no screening.
There is no screening test. There's a CA-125 blood test, but what is commonly misunderstood, that is not a screening test for ovarian cancer.
Right.
Because it can be elevated from any pelvic pathology.
Yeah.
Ovarian cysts.
Right.
Any inflammation in the pelvis can cause it to go up.
Right.
So it's useful if someone has a history of ovarian cancer.
Right.
And you're using it to monitor maybe a risk of recurrence.
That's not a detector.
No effective means of screening for ovarian
until
cancer
it's too late.
Until it's too late.
Yes. So that was the one that was the one that actually scared me more than the
Right.
actual breast kind of part of the diagnosis.
So then how did you know your family was complete? How did you, I don't know, how did you decide that it was time? And how old were you when you decided to proceed with an oophorectomy?
I was 29 when I had my oldest, who's now 12, which is crazy. I was 34 when I had my fourth. So it was like 4 kids in 5 years. It was like something. My husband was like, what? He was like, wait a second. What did we say we were doing?
That's a marathon.
Yeah, it was definitely
Yeah.
like, it was crazy. And again, I feel very fortunate we were able to do that and do it quickly. I think it was 6 months after I had my son. So I would have been 35. I decided to have my ovaries removed. So now this was also at a funny time where my doctor, who was doing all the screening for my breasts at Women's College, was like, there's a lot of research now that says if you just deal with your tubes and not your ovaries, that actually can prevent ovarian cancer. She's like, and
That's right. The
I don't know if
fallopian tubes,
Right.
which connect the ovaries to the uterus.
right.
It's been recently discovered that most ovarian cancers actually originate in the fallopian tubes.
Right.
So, yes, now they will encourage women to start by removing the fallopian tubes.
Yes.
Which leaves the ovaries in place, which prevents a lot of the complications that we'll get
Of
to in a minute.
Of menopause
Of
issues.
Menopause.
Yes. So
Yep.
this is one of those things that in hindsight, if I was to go back,
Mhm.
I would have just dealt with my tubes and left my ovaries. Because what no one really told me, my, doctor at the time included, was how much it messes with your body not having estrogen production.
Absolutely.
And you can go on HRT, you can do all these things.
Was that presented to you right away
No.
as an option?
No. I honestly,
At 35.
it was. So now this is almost what? This is 8 years ago, 7 years ago, no, 6 years ago.
Right.
It feels like the wild, wild west, what I was advised. I'm just being totally
Mhm.
honest. And I say this because I think there's more options than I think women probably realize. And it was
Yes.
just sort of like, well, we could just do your tubes, but you're going to have to get your ovaries done anyways when you're 40. So I was 35 at the time. So I was like, honestly, I don't want to go back for surgery in 5 years. I'll just do it now.
Which is also a very reasonable decision, as long as you're adequately counseled about what will come next.
And I wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't think, from my perspective, I was basically just told, not even you'll go on HRT. Well, you'll go on the pill. You'll go on the pill, and that will create just a baseline for you, and you'll feel fine. And so I was like, oh, okay.
Right. And
Well, so that's what I did.
and how did you feel on the pill?
I felt okay. I didn't love being on the pill.
Mhm.
I think that was the biggest thing. My baseline was actually fine. The questions would be so funny. They're like, are you tired? How's your sex drive? Like this and that. I'm like, well, none of the above is great, but
And
is
how
that
do you know
related to
how do you know
like
to attribute
being
it
a
to?
mom?
Exactly.
Or, because I'm not getting enough estrogen. So,
Right.
the doctor that I was seeing at the time was like, you should not be on the pill. They're like, who advised you to be on the pill? And someone who I did trust advised me to be on the pill.
Right. And the only reason I'm very surprised, because the more I learn, the more I speak to women, the more I delve into the world of menopause care, the more I realize that it's not completely coincidental that the pill is designed to work on your ovaries.
Right.
It's designed to suppress your ovarian function.
Right.
It's not just a handy dandy way to get some estrogen into your system and some progesterone into your system.
Right.
It doesn't, in my experience, it is not as effective for women in early menopause or in perimenopause.
Right.
And it is certainly not the right choice for someone who has had their ovaries removed.
Right. And with all the side effects.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that aside, that like
it's a valuable tool in
Yeah.
the right person at the right time,
yeah.
but it is not what would be at all recommended today. And I
Yeah.
have to say, it's still the wild, wild west, because
Right.
I recently heard from someone who has been struggling for 5 years, BRCA positive. Her doctor told her, you cannot ever be on HRT because it will, quote, wake up any cancer cells that are dormant in your body, which I promptly advised her to get herself to the specialist in Toronto
Right.
who knows the latest evidence. But 8 years ago, we're going back in time, right? Like
Right.
it was even more highly variable in terms of what people understood about this. So
Right.
how did you then make the transition to more traditional hormone therapy?
Well, the doctor that I was seeing post-operation was like, okay, you actually should get off the pill, and I'm going to put you on a gel. And then the gel, I mean, again, I was noticing like crazy night sweats, just mood, like very emotional. And then she switched me to a patch because I guess it was just providing like more of a regular dose of
That's
estrogen versus these like, peaks and valleys of estrogen that was clearly not working for me. So I've been on the patch and then I recently, I mean, now we're kind of like fast forwarding, but I ended up seeing you because I was like, something still feels odd. I don't know. I find it really interesting, and maybe you can speak to this, is, when doctors are asking you about your estrogen, it's sort of like, how are you what's the baseline? How are you feeling?
Right.
And you ended up testing me because I was like, I actually feel okay. And I tested at basically 0. I had no estrogen.
Yes, it was questionable. So it is not always necessary to test the levels, right? Because they're variable.
Right.
After menopause, though, they are less variable.
Right.
After menopause, they do tend to be more accurate in terms of they're more stable, and they can give us a better sense of, for example, is somebody absorbing the estrogen well through whatever means they're using, gel or patch. We sometimes do need to adjust the dose. And in your specific case, yes, I suspected you weren't absorbing it very well. And so we did have to increase your dose.
Right. And you did have to test. So you recommend then for women who are in menopause, if they're feeling off, to get
if you're not getting
regular blood work to test their estrogen levels.
Even just the one-off, right? Like I'm not testing you regularly. We did a test, and then we did another test to make sure you were absorbing it well. We increased your dose. Right? You needed higher doses than you were getting. And this is a really important point. It's a matter of fine-tuning things.
Right.
When you go on your hormone therapy. And I want to stress you're on progesterone too, because you have a uterus. So it's really important to be on both. But it's not a one size fits all. So if you are on hormone therapy and it is not, quote, working, you probably need a dose adjustment. It doesn't mean it's not for you or you're the one person that it just isn't effective. There are some people that unfortunately are a little bit resistant to it. But talk to your doctor if you're not feeling that your symptoms are resolving, because we go on the symptoms. So it's not incorrect to say, how are you feeling? I often get a really good sense if the dose is right. If you were like, I'm sleeping great and I no more night sweats and I feel like I have really good control over my moods. And other than the normal stressors in life, which you can tell the difference, Like, okay, is this something I'd be stressed about anyway? Then it's not my hormones. Then we know we're on the right dose, because the key is it's not just about how you're feeling. Women who are in early menopause are at much higher risk of osteoporosis and fractures and heart disease and dementia. We know all of these things. And it is actually now highly recommended. It's in the guidelines that anyone who's a BRCA carrier, after they've had their prophylactic mastectomy and salpingectomy, oophorectomy, which is the technical term for the tubes in the ovaries coming out, should be on hormone therapy, traditional hormone therapy.
And that is a patch or gel?
Patch or gel, typically, or pill, not a birth control pill. A proper hormone replacement until the age of natural menopause, and likely lifelong.
Really?
We're now seeing more studies that was just published within the last year in the Menopause Journal, and they looked at 10 million women in the United States who were now over age 65, but had started some form of menopause hormone therapy in the window of opportunity, which is, within 10 years of their menopause, their final period. And these women had a 90% reduction in all-cause mortality. It was attributed in this study to being on some form of hormone therapy. Now, if your circumstances change, there might be a reason why it's no longer advisable for you. But I just want women to be given the right advice. And I would much rather a doctor say, I don't know. Which is the truth. I don't actually know anything about this. which we're also afraid to say. I'll tell you what there's a lot of things in medicine I don't know anything about, right? They're not my field of expertise.
Right.
But don't say that you know and give the wrong information when you don't know. My opinion is any doctor who prescribes a birth control pill is perfectly capable of learning how to prescribe menopause hormone therapy. And I just want to say also, I'm self-taught in this area. I didn't have a special, educational program. Because of COVID, I wasn't able to go in the hospital and work with any of the specialists. I literally learned how to do this by attending lectures, webinars, reading the textbook from the Menopause Society, reading all the guidelines. And then I did this certification exam and became certified. I want to shift a little bit here because you are a mom of 4. When you discover that you have, a positive gene, BRCA.
Yeah.
You already knew this before you had kids, right? How did that impact your thought process in terms of having children, and then what risk you'd be maybe potentially conferring onto them?
That, to be honest, didn't so much. I was just sort of like, I want to have kids. Obviously, there's a chance they could get this gene. They can also test for it if they so choose.
Mm-hmm.
And, they can make decisions and, be sort of like preventative in, with their own health journey if they so choose. So I didn't see it as like, oh gosh, I can't pass this on. I think in terms of, them getting tested, I've been advised by many doctors, first of all, to not even really, they know what happened to me. We talk about it.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I'm very honest about my own health journey.
Right.
I mean, they were very little at the time when this happened, but, after I had my mastectomy, my husband got me like this like massive boob cake and my kids were all there and, we talked about it. And, the funniest thing my husband and I joke is they went to school and they were like, oh, my mom's been a bit sick. She just had a breast job, her boobs done. I was like, guys, can you at least make it sound like, not elective surgery. It was, I had to have it done. Anyways, it was funny.
But you normalized it.
We normalized it. And we talked about it. And so, we haven't gone into specifics with my own kids, especially my girls. I have 3 girls and a boy, but I have been advised that, they can get tested, when they're 18 and not to get tested earlier because there's nothing they can do. So, why get tested when you're, 12, 13, 14? There's nothing you can do. And it's obviously, could create anxiety, but it's their choice. It's not my choice. Yeah. I have plenty of friends who are at higher risk who choose not to get tested. They don't want to know. And so I think, everyone's journey is very different. You can find out and then you cannot decide to have a prophylactic double mastectomy and oophorectomy.
Right.
I don't have to worry. It was like, I'm done with it. And so for me, that was the right decision.
Right.
It's not the right decision for, everyone's got their own path and their own journey. And my girls will decide what's best for them. And I will support them however they choose. If they want to find out, if they don't want to find out, if they want to get preventative surgery, if they would rather, go down the route of just getting screened. I think it's, to your point, none of this is a one size fits all. So,
and everyone has a different level of anxiety, right?
100%.
And there is such a thing as testing fatigue, which is what you're describing, right?
Yes.
And oftentimes when people ask, well, why don't you just start screening for breast cancer at 20 or 30? And it's like, well, the likelihood is really low that you would have breast cancer at that age. And what you run the risk of testing fatigue. Yeah. Because all of those false positives and going in again and again and again. And then what happens is by the time you're 50 and you actually really, really need that mammogram, you're like, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. It's exhausting.
So it's a real thing. And also everyone has a different level of what they're willing to live with in terms of the anxiety of not knowing. And when it comes to genetic testing, people always want to explore the idea of genetic testing, not just for BRCA, but for lots of different genes. And there really is just a really kind of big line between things that we can actually do something about if we find out we're positive and things that there's nothing to do about it, right? So you have to factor that into your decision. And in this case, there's a lot that you can do. There's a spectrum of choices you can make to be proactive and to navigate your own uncertainty.
Yeah. And can you, with the BRCA testing now, because I did it so long ago and it was free and it was part of a research study. So can most women now go to their family doctor and ask to do the BRCA test, or is it not that simple?
You have to qualify for it through a family history. As far as I'm aware at this time, you still can't just
request it.
There are ways to privately pay for genetic testing. But I believe that specific study you were in is no longer an option. But if you have a high-risk history, a family history of someone who is BRCA positive, you either qualify for high-risk screening plus or minus the genetic testing.
Okay.
But it's always worth a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Your doctor doesn't know your family history. It's up to you to make them aware of that.
Be proactive.
Be proactive.
Advocate for yourself.
Absolutely.
It's so much easier said than done. Honestly, I feel like it's like you don't even know what to ask for half the time, you know? So,
absolutely. But it's always good just to say, look, I'm wondering if I might qualify for this.
Yeah.
And then give them your reasons why you think it might be so.
Yeah. And
let them either think about it or look into it a little more. I was not afraid to say to my patients, I'm going to have to look into that. Actually.
Can I get back to you?
Can I take a beat? Can I do some reading and let you know what I discover? I've probably got 5 things on my desk right now that are waiting for me to kind of figure out how to navigate, because medicine's changing fast.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's not trustworthy. If your doctor is a good doctor, they're actually trying to keep up with things. They're actually willing to do a little bit of digging for you. But there are a lot of really good physicians out there that are doing social media, that are putting themselves out there, that are working really, really hard to separate fact from fiction. I hope to be one of them.
Yes.
I think that I don't discount, though, what my patient's feeling and what they're doing. We can't just be guided by science because every person is different. And how are you feeling now? From a hormonal perspective, from a survivor perspective, how much thought do you give to all of this in your day-to-day at this point in time?
I feel pretty good, I would say. Like I mean, I'm healthy, I work out, I'm strong. I feel like I'm still sort of like, do I need to go on this? Do I need to, like, even though I'm on a patch, I'm on progesterone, but then it's like I feel like you do get sucked into these, different crazes, and you're like, could I be feeling better? I am worried about my cognition. That's like, I think one thing that I was, again, never really told when I had my ovaries removed, that, your cognition might not be the best after, a bit of an estrogen decline. So,
I think we intervened in time.
Yeah. So I think there's still things that I'm just like,
absolutely.
You're always worried about. But I think overall, like, I feel good. And, I'm glad I did what I did. I'm glad, the choices that I made. I mean, could I have waited 5 or 6 years, maybe longer, before I got my ovaries removed? Maybe. But I don't know. I made that choice, and now I don't have to worry.
Yeah.
So, like, I can deal with hormones. Dealing with cancer is a whole different thing. So
that's a really big point.
Yeah.
We're fortunate. We finally are understanding now that we should be treating women like yourself with hormones.
Yeah.
That it's not dangerous, that it is actually beneficial, and we can prevent a lot of the downstream effects like cognition, like heart disease. So it's really, really important, because we want to keep you thriving. I want you to feel like the same old you.
Totally. And you want to be there for your kids. It's like,
absolutely.
Like that's the main goal, is like, I want to be healthy for myself, for my children, for my family, it's like.
So one last question.
Yes.
What's next for you?
So I am right now, like I said, I'm totally pivoting careers, and I'm building a snack brand, which is super exciting.
And what's it called for everyone who wants to give you a follow?
We're not there yet.
Okay.
But as soon as we will, I feel like we will actually when this launches. So we can tag everything.
Let us know. Absolutely.
We can be the snack brand of choice in this room.
I speak to women all the time. They miss the goods so much, and they are dying to see what you do next.
Well, yeah. I mean, who knows? I feel like there's still so much out there. It's so funny. I feel like when you're younger, you think you hit like 40, and then that's like it, and you're old, and your career is your career, and you're done, and you can't change. And now I feel like I think, so many, especially women, are realizing like 40 is kind of like the new 30, and 50 is also, it's like you can be
especially
any.
with hormone therapy.
Oh yeah. You can feel amazing at 80. It's like so wonderful how
Yeah.
many times you can reinvent yourself and start something new and challenge yourself. And I think that's the most exciting thing about getting older is like you're less fearful of failing.
Absolutely.
And you learn in your failures. So it's like, you know what? Bring it on. And it's just, I think, a really exciting phase.
Well, thank you for being here today.
Thanks
This
so
has
much for
been
having
such
me.
a treat. I know that you've given such insight for women who maybe are just in the beginning. They've maybe just found out
Yeah.
that they carry this gene.
Yeah.
They're struggling with
Yeah.
all the what ifs and what should I do and what are all these decisions ahead of me. I think it's really, really helpful to hear from someone who's at the other end of that journey. So thank you for sharing so generously
My pleasure.
your experience.
My pleasure. And I just want to say, if anyone has any questions, anything at all, I'm a very open book about my journey, what I've done, the decisions I made. They can reach out to me. I don't know if either on my at Rens_recipes on social media, or to you, and I will pass along my email. But there is nothing that brings me more joy than being able to pass along that information and help someone else who might feel lost in their own personal journey.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
and I know
my
people
pleasure.
will really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Jen.
So now to close out the episode, we're going to do something, a wellness check-in. And I'm so lucky because to help kick things off, I've brought none other than my own offspring, my daughter, Maddie.
Hi.
And she's here. She goes to school in Guelph, but she's come in to film with us today and to tell you a little bit about her. She may be popping up from time to time in the podcast. So Maddie, why don't you tell everyone all about you?
I'm very excited to be here, and my name's Maddie, and I'm majoring in criminal justice for all you crime junkies out there, and I'm also minoring in psychology, hoping to, dive into more of the forensic psychology aspect of criminology.
And you came by your love of true crime naturally. I exposed you at probably far too early an age to forensic files.
Right. I think
because I myself am a secret true crime junkie. And Dad used to get really mad because he'd be listening to it with me in the car and he would say, "You're freaking her out." But I want you to be well equipped. You have to know every trick in the book that a criminal might use to try to
Well, I think I wouldn't have been interested in criminology if I didn't hear those episodes from an early age, because I wouldn't have really never known that was a possible field of education. I didn't know that, people could go to school and just study criminology, and that was really helpful to watch those shows and kind of see what people who actually study criminology do for a living. So
we're putting a positive spin on it. Look at that.
What do you have in mind, Maddie? What's new and exciting for you that you want to start doing or that you've recently started doing?
I find painting very therapeutic, or arts and crafts. So anything drawing or sketching or painting is something that I like to do whenever I feel stressed.
That's interesting because that really is a form of meditation. People think meditation or mindfulness, right, can only be literally sitting and meditating. But anything that gets you really out of your head and into the moment, into what you're doing and focusing on one task is meditation.
Right.
So it's really interesting because we all know when you're a kid, you sit and the way you unwind, the way you relax is you're doing art. That's great. Mine's not quite as relaxing.
Right.
So, I've been on my own health journey for the past couple of years. I have been getting more into strength training, right? Because I have to practice what I preach. The older we get, the more we have to retain and maintain our muscle mass because we lose a lot of muscle mass. So one thing I've started doing is wearing a weighted vest when I do some of my strength training. And I'll put it on so you can see.
Okay, so I carried this thing and it probably weighs at least 20 pounds.
Okay, this is a 15-pound weighted vest. And a doctor I really respect and admire, Dr. Mary Claire Haver, introduced me to this idea. But what I love about it is
it is so fantastic for people like me who I hate having to lift heavy weights while I'm doing squats, for example,
Right.
or doing a plank. If you want to level up a little bit, I'm not saying this is for beginners. I've been doing strength training for a couple of years before I started this, but even just for walking to just add a little bit of strength training into your cardio, it's really comfortable, it's really effective, and there's different weights.
Oh, wow.
So if you're beginning and you can get a 5-pound or an 8-pound vest, or you can work your way up, so they can kind of grow with your routine. So my plan is to incorporate this more and more into my strength training and resistance training.
I feel like it will also help with, proper form as well. I feel like with that, I would be less focused on my arms and more focused on my lower
That's
body.
true. In a way, because of the way it's weighted, it forces you to be so aware of your posture. So
Yeah.
you're right. Just that awareness of your body in space, it really does help to, to keep you on your proper form. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, remember, we do tape all of our episodes. So if you want to see a visual of me in my weighted vest, feel free to go to YouTube and check us out at Medsplaining. We are also on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok at Medsplaining. If you have any questions, shoot me a DM. And if you'd like this episode, the best thing you can do is tell a friend or rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast so other women can discover it. And don't forget, if you're listening to this, you may be happy to know that we video every single episode, so you can watch it if you prefer on YouTube. See you next week. Medsplaining is produced by Ghost Bureau. Thank you for tuning in to Medsplaining. While we strive to provide accurate and insightful information, this podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed by our host and guests are their own and should not be interpreted as medical advice. Every individual's health situation is unique, and it is crucial to consult with a qualified healthcare provider regarding your specific concerns and conditions. Additionally, any links, resources, or references mentioned in our episodes are provided for informational purposes only and are not sponsored by Medsplaining. The producers and hosts of Medsplaining assume no responsibility or liability for any actions taken as a result of listening to our podcast. We encourage you to use the information presented here as a starting point for discussions with your healthcare provider. Information and references are subject to change based on scientific evidence as it evolves over time. The hosts and producers of Medsplaining are not responsible for future changes to the information and references and assume no obligation to update based on future developments. Remember, your health and well-being are paramount. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to exploring more topics in women's health with you in future episodes.